Well, greetings and salutations, test takers. This is Dean Tenney coming to you from my off-grid studio, getting our kicks on Historic Route 66. This is our paid office hour. It's a free office hour for paid students. So people who've bought tutoring or attended one of my classes are welcome to join us for these sessions. We'll see what people want to talk about. All right, first come, first serve. So whatever you want to talk about, put it in the chat. One question per chat, and then we go around the horn and we answer whatever's there. We'll go around the horn a couple times before we call it a day. So
Sounds good.
first up in the chat is nobody has anything to talk about. Well, that'll be great. I'm more than happy to call it a day.
Okay.
What should be on my dump sheet? Well, everybody, Abby, is a little different about what should be on their dump sheet. I would put in your Google Translator machine, whatever exam data dump sheet, and see what comes up. I would certainly. Are you taking Abby Series 7? What do you SIE? I would certainly. Well, SIE doesn't lend itself. I certainly have slobs over bliss, right? That's to remind us as a memory aid device where we place orders in relationship to the current market price. By the way, it's better that you know the information and then use your memory aid to reinforce that than trying to just have a memory aid and not knowing what it's, goes to. Because that became disconcerting to have all these memory aids and not kind of know what it means, right? So I would want you to understand buy limits and sell stops and sell limits and buy stops before you do the slobs over bliss as the memory aid about where they go. I would certainly have my teeter totter or seesaw. It helps me turn judgment questions about interest rate and bond prices inverse relationship into recognition questions. That teeter totter or seesaw is good for all exams. So, this whole thing about, when interest rates go up, the bond goes down, and where is the nominal current yield, yield to maturity, yield to call in relationship to that? On SIE, I'm not sure if I would put my options matrix up on my data dump sheet because and the SIE maybe 3, 4, 5 option question, most of which are going to be recognition, not strategy. Series 7, you're much different. But on SIE, it's mainly like when do options expire? What's the difference between American style and European style? That kind of thing. And then there is indeed a strategy question or two. And I think you got to decide on the SIE how much time you want to spend on options, knowing what Dean just told you, that it's mainly recognition. I'm not opposed to that, particularly if you're going on to a 7, because it will pay dividends on your 7. Because on the 7, there's 20 option questions. You definitely need the matrix, and you're going to test on strategies, right? So, what else would I have on there? Maybe you want to have other people's monies count. That's a memory aid device to remind us of the order flow to clear an order. We have clearing firms and OPM, other people's money count, or order peanuts, Mr. Carter, is to remind us that the order goes first to the order department, who transmits the order to the appropriate market center for execution. By the way, not only could that be a question about sequence, that could also be a question about who does what at the department, right? What does the order department do? Test question. They transmit orders to the appropriate market center for execution. Then it goes to the P&S department. That's the purchase and sales department, and they generate confirmations or they match trades. Then it goes to the margin department, who determines whether monies or securities are due. And then it goes to the cashiering department, who actually takes receipt of monies and securities. If you have all those departments, you are a clearing broker dealer. Not all of us have those departments. Some of us farm that out to a clearing firm. Those are the departments of a clearing firm. Big clearing firm is National Financial, Broadcourt, Pershing. Those are what we call clearing firms. And we have firms that are order entry firms, meaning they don't have that. They have customers and they take their customer order and they give it to Pershing or to National Financial, whatever the case may be. I would definitely, Abby, have Datto 15. Datto 15, that's to remind us of the chronological sequence, very testable, of options, right? We give them the disclosure document, the characteristics and risks of options. This is 100 plus pages, Abby, and all the bad things that can happen to you. I'm not going to, sit here while you wait while you read it because it's going to take you a few days to get through this. That's the D. A is the account approval. Abby, I'm going to go try and get you approved for options by my registered option principal. That's the A. I said, good news, Abby, I got you approved. That's the O. D, A, account approval, first trade. And the O is the option agreement. I say, Abby, within 15 days of account approval, I need back the option agreement. If it's not back on time, I'm only going to let you do closing transactions. So that's definitely a good memory aid device for that chronological sequence. By the way, I told you you could have one sheet of paper on it, Abby, with anything on it front and back to take into the exam. What would be on that sheet of paper? As you're studying, say, "Ooh, I think I want to add that to my data dump sheet," right? And you keep adding, building it. Everybody's would be a little different. I've seen some data dump sheets. I go, I wouldn't put that on there, but it was a little different. So those are some ideas for you. But certainly Google that, see what other people have done. Make it your own, though, because you need to have intellectual ownership of this material, not physical ownership, right? It's not that can you do a data dump sheet, it's can you then apply it at the exam, right? Do you know what your memory aid devices are about? And I would just warn you about that. Make sure you have intellectual ownership of the content and then use that. By the way, I do think it's a good way to warm up, right? If I was at the exam, Abby, I think a good way to get you kind of in the rhythm is to flush it out. Your best at before you go to bed and when you wake up. So make up your model and then see how close you can come to replicating it just before you go to bed. And when you wake up in the morning, if you do that every day, by the time you get to the exam, you'll be able to do it. Now, I would play dumb. What I mean by that is they're going to make you start the clock. You shouldn't run out of time anyways, but I would just pretend I don't know that. And I'd be doing my data dump sheet and they'd say, hey, Dean, you got to start the exam. I go, oh, my bad. I didn't know. I still wouldn't start the clock. I'd let them walk off and I'd continue my data dump and they'd come back and say, hey, you got to start the clock. Oh, they're used to confused people. So I would just play dumb like I'm confused and I don't get it. Right. And, at some point you got to hit the button and start. And I don't think it's a time constraint. I get really aggravated when people do have time constraints. And the reason I get aggravated is because that means they haven't done practice tests to know how long it takes them to work through X number of performance opportunities. So when you're doing your practice tests, do your data dump sheet with the clock running, do your practice test so you know what that feels like time wise, right? Because you don't want to put yourself into a mode where oh my God, I spent so much time on my data dump, I don't have time to do the test. And so remember, you get two sheets of paper. So I would only allocate one of those, two sheets of dry erase paper to my data dump sheet. So front and back, and then have one you can use to do that. All right, let's see what's next. The IO sure is 90 days, 120 at Frisco to the SEC. No, that's not true, Vince. It's 90 to the SEC and state administrator. It's 120 to the customer, right? So those are different numbers. 90 is to the regulatory authorities is the way I would think of that. 120 is to the customer. And you're right for material changes. The word material is a really important word. What material means is something that would alter your investment decision. So, Vince, if I'm trying to stay out of trouble and they say, why didn't you do this? I'd say, I thought it was immaterial. That means I didn't think it was something that would alter somebody's decision. I can't believe this broker, worst answer I've ever heard in my life. They asked the broker, why didn't tell the person the information? And he said, I thought I'd lose the sale. That is the all-time worst answer. That means you knew it was a material fact. You're supposed to say, hey, Vince, it might alter your investment decision, but I'm a convicted felon. I'm not, by the way. But, if I was, I should disclose that. I should disclose that. And then annually to clients, regardless of anything changing. That's true. There's nothing for BD. The BD has no equivalent kind of rule. All right. A third one here is Carlene. Carlene, an investor purchased 200 shares of Hightown National Bank at 120.06. Oh, man. Test prep vendors are such jerks. On the real test, they're not going to ever give you a stock price that is 120.06. It'll be straightforward. It'll be 120 or 110 or whatever the case may be. 13 months later. Now that's important. And the reason that's important, I'm just reading the question as we go here. But the reason I think that's important is because it seems like this investor has been at risk for more than 12 months. And that's important because if you've been at risk for more than 12 months, you qualify for a long-term capital gain. So, okay, let's see what's next. Later, paid a 15% stock dividend. You should definitely know that a stock dividend means I'm going to adjust my cost base. It's not taxable to receive that stock dividend, but now I'm going to get more shares. I'm getting more shares. Everybody's getting more shares. Very testable. No effective change in my proportion in ownership. I have more shares, but so does everybody else. So now I'm going to get my calculator and I'm going to say, okay, well, she had 200 shares. It tells me it's a 15% stock dividend. I'm going to times that by 15%. By the way, this, Abby, is the exact calculator they're going to hand you at the exam site. Please note, it's a simple function calculator. I'm not being facetious. If it's been a while since you used a simple function calculator, I would go buy one for $5 and, practice your skills because we've been using like an algebraic or financial calculator. This might freak you out. Okay, so I get 30 more shares. So I had 200 shares. Now I have 230 shares. My cost basis hasn't changed, but my cost basis per share has. So now I'm going to figure out what I pay. Cost basis is simply when I turn my money into the investment. So I bought 200 shares times 120.06. So my cost basis is $24,012. I don't know. Can you guys see that calculator on the camera? Can you actually see the display or just the calculator? Cool, cool. Okay, so I'm gonna make a note of that. $24,012. Now I got to figure out what that bought me, right? It didn't buy me 200 shares. It now bought me 230 shares. So now I'm going to divide that by 230 and I get my adjusted cost base per share. My adjusted cost base per share is 104.40. Okay. Now, by the way, this is you know, obviously, as I said from the beginning, this is definitely a test prep vendor question, Carlene. My guess is that this is a past perfect question because they are big jerks. This is whoever wrote this was a jerk. Maybe it's Chuck Lowenstein and Kaplan. Oh, Kaplan, Kaplan, pretty big jerks too. So, you know, oh well. Okay. We shouldn't let that distract us, right? We get a bad practice question. You say, jerks, just settle in. I don't think it'll be this complicated, right? So, anyways, I got my adjusted cost base. Uh, she sells the shares received from the stock dividend. Okay, so jerks. I didn't sell all my shares. I only sold the shares that I got from the stock dividend. That was 30 shares. So I didn't sell all of them. I just sold 30 shares. And they told me I sold those 30 shares for 112.57. Okay, so now I got to take my adjusted cost base of 104.40. And now we have my sales proceeds. My sales proceeds is 112.57. And let me move. I probably should do this on a whiteboard in just a sec. Give me a sec. So minus 104.40, $8.17 on 30 shares. It's $245.10 long-term capital gain. Right? Let me put that up on a whiteboard and do it that way. Let's see if I can keep the chat up while I'm doing the whiteboard. Do, 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 do. Can you guys see my whiteboard? Okay, so here we go. So I'm just going to show you what I did there, math-wise. So what I did first was an investor purchases 200 shares at 120.06. So I took 200 shares times 120.06, and I got my cost basis. We said cost basis is simply when you turn your money into the investment, right? So we took 200 shares times 120.06, and we got $24,012. Boom. And okay, and then whoop. One of the reasons too, I would just comment that if you, well, the reason you want to practice, drill, and rehearse is because I just did this on the fly with you guys. Obviously, I'm the Series 7 guru, so I should be able to do it on the fly. But what we want you to do is get to where you can kind of somehow kind of kickstart what you're going to do. So I would read the question once and say, okay, well, what am I going to do here? The next thing I did is the question told us that we had a 30% stock dividend. So I simply times this by 30% to see how many additional, excuse me, 15% to stock dividend to see how many additional shares I'm going to get. By the way, I'm getting 15% more shares. Everybody's getting 15 or more shares. So Abby, for you on your SI, very testable to know that a stock dividend or stock split does not affect proportionate ownership because everybody's getting more shares. Same with the reverse split. Everybody has less shares. It's the same proportion, right? So this is more of a marketing gimmick than anything else. So then what we established was that I'm going to get 30 additional shares, right? That's what I did. That boom, right? So now I have a total position of 230 shares. And then the question said, 3 months later. Now it doesn't matter 3 months later because remember, it started by saying I had this stock for 13 months, right? So it doesn't matter. I just got the stock dividend because I've been at risk for more than 12 months on this $24,000. So now they say I sell 30 shares. They didn't say so 30 shares. They said the shares I received from the stock dividend. And they said I sold that. That's called my sales proceeds for 112.57. And that is called sales proceeds. That's just when you turn the investment back into money. That's a boom. And so I sold 30 shares there. And then I have to figure out what my adjusted cost base is. So I take my $24,012. I divide by 230 shares. By the way, most times you can get this right by just knowing I'm going to have more shares at a lower price. That alone, sometimes you can just shop the answer set and get it. So, anyways, this divide by 230 is 104.40. By the way, I believe in doing things per share because I just think it's a mess if you try and do this in one fell swoop. But I could have just taken 30 times 120, but I like to actually do it this way so I can just compare these two numbers. And I think it's easier to be doing things on a per share basis. I don't tell like Larry Ellison, he's up $4 billion today. I just say Oracle went up $2 a share. He goes, what's that mean for me? And I go, well, you figure it out. I probably wouldn't say that, but So here now I just net those two numbers and boom, looks like I'm a happy camper. I made $8.17. And then remember, I only sold here 30 shares. And so hopefully that's one of the answers. Whoever submitted this at 245.10 is a long-term capital gain because we've been at risk for more than that. Who was this? This was Carlene. Is that the right answer? Didn't get the right answer, I hope. I don't think you told us what the right answer was. Cool. Do you anyone who helps with interviews? I don't, Vince. I don't know anybody who helps with interviews. There's got to be some, you know, interview guru there, I would imagine. Um, uh, I've been very lucky, I guess, because I never did a traditional interview to get a job. So, I mean, I'd be clueless. I read stories about kind of questions they ask people at Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan when they're interviewing. I'm like, okay, well, man, I would have flunked out of that for sure. So, uh, I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
can't.
I've had a couple of tough interviews, so I figured
Yeah,
ask
I
if
don't.
you
I've
might
been
have
very
any.
blessed. When I started out, I was a baby broker. I made like a little. I'm dating myself, but I made a little flyer, and I was like a response coupon. And it said, "What makes this would be, Wall Street wizard worth meeting?" And you could check, no, we don't need like a loyal, hardworking, dedicated human capital person. And yes was, yeah, call me for an interview kind of thing. And I sent out like 10 of them and I got like 6 interviews. And then I was hired by a guy named Jeffrey Kilpatrick. And I always thought, and I tell everybody too, I mean, you got to decide in the beauty contest whether you're a judge or a contestant, you got to decide. I guess, when you're starting out, you're a contestant, but now I'm kind of a judge, right? I don't need to be a contestant any longer on any of these kind of things. But I always try and tell people when you're starting out, I would rather have a good learning experience with people I would like to hang out with than the money. Because I
Mhm.
truly believe, now I realize that's not possible for everybody because we got to pay our bills. But in our business, if you stick with it a lengthy period of time, the money will take care of itself. By the way, Vince, the guy I told you about, Jeffrey, he found me on YouTube and he's gotten to Jeffrey, so I'm old. He's even older, and he was reminiscing about the old times. And I said, Jeff, now as you remember, all of us had to leave you because you wouldn't pay us. I mean, eventually, it would have been great if you would have just stepped up and paid us. And he still got the same mentality. I guess it worked for him. He said, well, Dean, I always knew that I didn't pay people what they should be paid, but provided them the learning experience. I thought, okay, well, cool. But I think it would have been better, now in hindsight that, you would step up and pay people, and then you would have to continually be training people and losing people. And we all could have spent the last 30 years together making a lot of money, but
Yeah.
oh well. So
Hey,
I had somebody who was
yeah,
working at like Robinhood answering the phones, and they didn't like it at all. And I was trying to give them encouragement and say, the great thing about answering calls from confused people all day long is you're going to learn very quickly because you're talking to 1,000. They put you like the Irish phone desk at Schwab or Robinhood or Fidelity or something, and you're taking 1,000 calls a day. I don't know, 200 calls a day on IRAs. By the end of 3 weeks, you're going to be an expert on IRAs. And so I was telling him that's more important in the beginning. I mean, a retail broker is going to spend most of his days and is I mean, he's not going to get a chance to really learn about Iris until he gets a customer, right?
right.
So I've been looking for a learning experience and people you want to hang out with. That may not be, I don't know how that comes off as an interview question. Like, you know, I don't think that I could flip the tables and say, I'd like to interview you. Is this a place worth me working at? I would be hoping that they have people that've been there a long time. That's a good sign, right? If there's people that've been there, that doesn't mean they're losers. I mean, if there's like a Fidelity or a Schwab and some of those men and women have been there 20, 30 years and they're rich and they just choose to come to work.
Right.
Um, Jamie Dimon made this point. I'm with Jamie on this. Jamie started out as an assistant to a guy named Sandy Weil. He was a sales assistant. And I always joke, it matters who you're a sales assistant to. I had a young lady I helped get a job at BlackRock, and she was calling me about being offered this position as an administrative assistant, and that all her peers were telling her she should not become an administrative assistant because it's a step backwards rather than forwards because, they're going to move on to the next level as like senior vice president. I said, Amanda, I don't believe that because the person you're being offered to be the administrative assistant to, that's huge. That you're going to have more power than they got. And I said, and listen, that person would not drop you back onto the career track without putting you ahead of where they're at. So the person I understand is not offering this as a career position. They're offering this to you as a 2, 3 year kind of a learning experience. And where I'm with Jamie Dimon, that's how he started, right? As an assistant to a very powerful kind of guy. And look where he's at. So one of the things he's been talking about, why he wants people to come back to the office is for mentorship and fellowship and I'm an old school guy too. I don't know how we do it nowadays. I feel sorry for you guys as test takers. We don't have cohorts. A lot of us are doing it at home by ourselves. And in the old days, we'd have a cohort of 20, 30 people that had been hired, and we're all taking the test together, and we go have lunch together. And if somebody had a bad day, we go get a cocktail, So um, it's a tough situation. So I'm with you, Vince, in spirit. I just don't even know if I was starting out if I would be able to do it. I mean, the world has changed too much. Let's see what else we got. To remember the math equations, well, there's a couple things here, Abby. I'm not a big fan, and it's kind of like your data dump question. I'm not a big fan of just simply memorizing formulas. I like to know the math in the circumstances I'm going to need the math, right? So current yield, for example, on your SIE, not a lot of math on the SIE again. Current yield for sure, total return for sure, adjusted cost basis for sure. And some people like to have just a list of their formulas. I would rather have my formulas in my mind by subject area. How do I proceed given this question, right? Um, and then, I say this all the time, and I mean it, that most of the math on the exam is division, all the exams. So I joke, if you can't remember what to do, divide. And if you can't remember what to divide, take the first number divided by the second number. That takes care of about 90% of the math. Now, as it relates to current yield, we do have a memory aid device for that, AMP. That stands for AMP, annual dividend or interest, what the investment pays me, divided by what the investment costs me. We call that AMP, right? So that's a good way to remember that one. But again, if you tell me you missed the SIE because of math or options, I must say, you had bigger problems. You had bigger problems. Let's see what. Oh, five new messages. Let's see what else we got. Customer purchased ABC at $3, convertible preferred stock at 60. So okay, so ABC, I think $3 is the dividend. So the dividend can be expressed as either a percentage or a dollar amount. I'll see when I get to the question. At $60. So boom. Remember what I called that? It's like learning a foreign language. That's called cost basis. Yeah, Bob, what's up?
9 hours.
9 hours. You were a worker, man.
Yeah, we travel time.
No, no
9
worries.
hours,
No
8 to
worries.
5.
Yeah.
Nope, it's all done.
All right.
So just tomorrow's just ended.
Don't kill yourself, my
Nope.
friend. I need you long term. All right. I'll sell it to you as soon as I'm done with this call.
No.
Oh, you want to settle up tomorrow?
Yep, we'll
Okay.
it tomorrow.
All right, cool. That's my contractor. He works too hard. And I told him, I said, Bob, it's sunny. Go home, man. You know, I'm building decks around here. So my mom is 80 and she's retired and I take care of her and I don't want her to trip anywhere. So my solution has been to build these decks so she can get from the cabin to the container and back and, to the laundry room and she doesn't have to, touch any uneven ground. Now I could have done concrete, which would have been a lot cheaper, but I've been using this fake, it's like fake lumber. It's called Truex. So when I get all done out here, I'm going to do a little tour for the channel. I'll show you my compound. I'm ready now for the zombie apocalypse. Off grid. I've got generators and I got solar arrays and all kinds of good stuff. All right, so $60 is what we paid. We call that cost basis. We had somebody, Abby, yesterday, last night on the live stream talking about vocabulary. And, my comment to him was, yeah, the vocabulary is important because, if you can't, understand the vocabulary, you can kind of bog down. All right, let's see what the next thing is. Par value is $50. Oh, jerks. So the way we say this is that par value for preferred stock is $100 unless otherwise stated. And here it's otherwise stated. And again, no company would ever have par value 50. So only test prep vendors give you questions where par value is not 1,000 for a bond or not 100 for this. The conversion price is $5. Now, this is really important. Whenever we're given the conversion price, we need to establish the conversion ratio. It is much more important for us to know the conversion ratio than it is to know the conversion price. So listen, good news, I'm not an employee of anybody, so I don't have to worry about an HR department. But I do get hired sometimes to teach classes. And I had said, and it's being taped, and I said, whenever you get the conversion price, you got to say, bastard. I don't need the conversion price. I need the conversion ratio. And oh my God, their HR department reached out to me and said, did you use the word bastard in the class? And I go, well, I did. It's taped, and obviously somebody took exception to what I said, and I did. What can I tell you? My bad. Anyways, make sure when you get that conversion price, you just stop right away and you say, okay, well, I need to figure out how many shares I can get. And the way I do that is I take par, which in this case was $50. I divide by the conversion price, which is 5, and I get really important the conversion ratio. As we said, that is really, really important. If you're taking, I'm assuming you're taking a Series 7. You don't need to worry about, Abby, any of this except this conversion ratio. They made on your SIE ask you a conversion ratio, but they're not going to ask you to do parity or anything like that. And I said this is really important because almost always this is where this question is heading. It's heading to some kind of a discussion about what we call parity. Parity means equal, right? So there's my conversion ratio. And again, you probably maybe wouldn't be like Dean, just kind of taking it as it comes to me, so to speak. But and who knows? I might make a wrong turn here somewhere. But you probably want to read this once just to see where it's heading, right? All right. So it says if the common stock is trading a half a point below parity, the price of ABC. Parity means equal. So what we do here is we take the current market price of the convertible, which in this case is 60, and we're going to divide that. As I said, if you can't decide what to do, we always divide. And so here, the current market price of this convertible is 60. And we're going to divide that by the conversion ratio. And the conversion ratio here is 10 shares. And now we have what we call parity. Parity. Parity means equal. What we mean by that is that if we pay $60 for this convertible preferred stock and we turn it into 10 shares of the common, we would be paying $6. And that is called parity of the common stock. Uh, I would be prepared on Series 7 to do parity of the stock and parity of the bond. Parity of the bond will be go the other direction. We take the stock and we multiply. Now, we're not quite done here, and this is obvious for everybody, SIE included. You should definitely know that a point in a bond is $10. And you should know that a point in a stock is a dollar. So if I tell you the stock's up a point, that means it's up a dollar. And so here it says it's trading a half a point below parity. So in a stock, a point is a dollar. I always joke, I'm not a golf guy, but I've had clients who are members of some serious golf clubs and private golf clubs, and they tell me they don't play for money, they play for points. And I think that's just BS, that really the points have a numerical value when they settle up. And before you go out there and play golf with them, and if they said to me, "Hey, Dean, we play for points," I said, "Well, before I go out there and hit the ball with you guys, what's a point? Is it a dollar? Is it a $10? Is it $1,000? What is a point?" Here it's a dollar, so that means a half a point would be 50 cents. Boom. And so now I can answer the question because $6 is parity since it's below a half, below that. And so that is the current market price of the convertible. All right. So kind of a complicated one. So, Carlene, were you one of my paid students, or were you in a Kaplan class, or did you do tutoring with me? Yes, no, because this is supposed to be for paid students. I don't remember, Carlene, if we spent time together, but I like your questions, so I'm not going to boot you. I'm just, interested to know. There you go, Kaplan. Okay, perfect. That means you qualify for this session, and you've had some good questions like that. I'm not sure, Vince, what you mean by he works T+1. What's that mean? You can unmute. I don't understand it. That
I was just making a joke about the contractor.
Yeah,
He said he can settle up tomorrow.
I'm developing. I'm with you, Vince. I feel pretty honored that I have developed a pretty good reputation out of here because all my contractors used to make me put up half, and then when they're done, I give them the rest of it, and now they let it ride. But it's a little more loosey goosey than it used to be because Bob, who just left, I gave him like $5,000 for materials, and then he told me, gave me the receipt, and it was like 2,000. And then he said, and I'll just work against the three. And I thought, well, I don't remember that conversation with you that you're going to keep my $3,000 and work against it. But hey, he's a very important guy out here off grid because he knows where my scale. I have another contractor who's tried to take all the work from Bob. I said, Michael, I love you too, and there's plenty of work for everybody. But Bob is close by. Mom loves him, and if we have a problem at 2 a.m. in the morning or something, and I call Bob, he will be here. And as much as you want to be here, it would take you 2 hours. So, Bob ain't going anywhere. And I said, if you guys get into it, I just want to be clear with you. You are going to be leaving the property, not Bob. Bob is, he's sticking around. But I don't, right now today, we finally got a good sunny day. And I do worry about him working a little too hard. You know, I tell him, I say, listen, at 1 or 2 o'clock, I want you to kind of think about calling it a day. That it'll be here tomorrow, but I don't think he's greedy. I just think he's a hard worker. I respect that, but I would have knocked off at 2 o'clock and go had a beer or something. But I think it's because again I'm a broker, so I worked on the West Coast, so I'm used to 1 o'clock. The day's over, but I start my day at like 4 a.m. So the idea that I'm going to be working until 8 or 9 or something would just blow my mind. All right, let's see what else we got. Um, there you go. Perfect. If are you joining me for 66, Carlene? Because if you do, and you get another pass, I give you a little tombstone that says, you're like memorializes your testing victories. So keep track of that. Um, you haven't passed the 70. Okay, well, we'll get that one done. If you get all three, remember we call that the hat trick. All right, that looks like we took care of everything. I'll usually put up another one after we do this, so expect to on the booking page see another office hour, and I usually cap them. So if you're looking for it and you don't see it, give me till tomorrow to put it up. But if you don't see it, just call me, and what I'll do is I cap it at 5. Once it gets 5, it drops, so people can't see it any longer because we don't want to have 15 people here. So, but I always will make an exception. If you call me and say, "Hey, Dean, where's the office hour?" I'll send you a link or I'll open up the size. Anything else for today?
So, Dean, can we join more than one office
Yeah,
hour?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. So,
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, because my exam is coming up on the 30th.
yeah,
Um, and
yeah. Office hours, any office hour. The other thing, remember, we do too that's free is Q&A jam sessions, and those are free for everybody. So, there, Carlene, it wouldn't matter if you paid any money or not. Those are free. So there's not many free things on the booking page. Only free things are on the booking page. On the YouTube channel, everything is free. But on the booking page, the only thing that are free are the Q&A jam sessions and the office hours for paid students. Can you do more
oh,
math? Well, Amber, I'm more than happy to do math. If you got if you have a math problem you want to you should, Amber, what I think is you should always have a dean to-do list. And what I mean by that is have questions to bring, math questions to bring. Like Carlene brought us some good questions, I thought. Are you taking Amber the Series 7 too? That's good. I mean, so the disadvantage sometimes is like the office hour, like Abby probably got a little more than she needs for the SIE. But hey, that's the nature of the beast, right? Vince got his one NASA question, but bring your questions, bring Kaplan QIDs, or like Carlene, bring a question you got to put in the chat. If you're using Kaplan, you can just give me the Kaplan QID and I can bring it up on my screen. So if you just said, hey, Dean, this is QID 156885, you don't need to put it in the chat. I can just bring it up and we can look at it. Any specific? Yeah, I think Vince, I love it, right? You got your 65, right? He's on the way to be one of my favorites. He got he missed his 66, but I know he put in the work. And I said, man, an aggressive plan B would be to go get your 63 and 65. And I think you could not do much more work and pass the 65. And I think Vince, right? You nailed that one, right? Got that testing victory.
I did on Monday morning. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And 63,
I was
same
just
thing.
so
Just the
happy.
regulation. Just the
I've got
regulation.
the prospectus here of
I love it.
the
I love
whole
it.
test, just
So
like you said. And
yeah, 63 is
now
just
I've got it of the 63. I just
it's
don't have.
nothing new for you, my friend. You now have seen the 63 twice.
Okay.
You saw the 63 on your 66. This is Uniform Securities Act, Uniform Securities Act. And then you saw it again on your 65, and now you're going to see it a third time. So I think this that dragon isn't as intimidating as perhaps he once was because you've seen him, and you say, "Ha, you know, I got you, man. So I can't imagine that. Just practice till reverse. You should be fine. It looks like we have a Kaplan QID, so let me go grab that. Boom, boom, boom. This will be our last one. Boom, boom, boom. Was it what exam was that? Hold on, let me just grab you guys here. Is that a series 7? Okay, cool. And let me. Can you guys see my screen? And let's go get us the QBank. There we go. And let me get the chat so I can see the QID again. 168 4527. On Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020, your customer purchased a block of City-Y 4% recreational authority term revenue bonds quoted at 22. My goodness. 22% of par. $220. Boy, that kind of sounds like a zero coupon bond to me, but let's see. The bond stated interest payments are J and J1, so January 1st, July 1st. I don't like this 22. There's something funky about 22. After receiving the confirmation, the customer called and asked why there was no additional cost for the accrued interest. The most likely reason is this is a tough one. Trading flat means no calculation of accrued interest. And that would explain why this is trading at such a steep, steep discount, because this bond is in default. This bond is a default because it says it's trading flat. The only bonds that trade with no calculation of accrued interest trade flat are bonds in default, zero coupon bonds, or income or adjustment bonds. So the answer is A. The accrued interest is paid by the seller. No, that is definitely wrong. You should have known that's wrong. Accrued interest is paid by the buyer to the seller. The trade is settled on the interest payment date. You should definitely know that's wrong. You should know settlement here is going to be Thursday, April 23rd. So maybe I would have attacked this with process of elimination. Right? I should have known B is not true. I should have known C is not true. D, if there was a mistake on the confirmation, it'll be rectified shortly. That's never going to be the right answer. That's just nonsensical. It's going to be rectified shortly. So bonds are trading flat. So let's see what our friend Bill James tells us. Bill James is the subject matter expert at Kaplan. He's in charge of this QBank. I joke, Bill, he's my friend, but good news for us, I guess, he's a bigger jerk as the guys who write the tests. So, he's trying to stretch your mind and hope it doesn't go back to the same spot. Vince, the Kaplan guy for you, the NASAA exam is a guy named Chuck Lowenstein. And like Bill, he too is as big a jerk as the guys who write the test. But good news, their hearts are on the right spot. And then, when I get into it every once in a while, when I call him, I go, come on, Bill, Chuck, whoever, this is outrageous. They go, oh, well, Dan, and then we, make up in the end. So bonds trading without accrued interest or trading flat, I would know that, by the way. That is a vocabulary term I would know on Series 7. The trading flat means no calculation of accrued interest. Every bond trades flat twice a year. Oh, here we go with Bill getting in the weeds. What Bill is trying to say here is that if you took ownership on January 1st or July 1st, then the next check would belong to you. You, the buyer, would tell me, well, Dean, I'm going to own the bond for the entire 6-month time frame, so that check is mine. I said, okay, cool. However, that's not the case here because the bond would settle on April 23rd. Who cares? The interest payments are January. The price of the bond is a hint. A 4% bond selling at 22% is likely in default. I wouldn't feel bad about that one out at all, Amber. On this one, I'd probably go, yeah, right. That wouldn't cause me to lose any sleep if I were a test taker. I'm actually, Carlene, I'm not as worried about scores being as high as possible. The higher, the better. But I think mid 70s is fine. If as long as you know what you're missing and why you're getting things right. I get nervous if people get too high a score because that might mean they're just memorizing questions and answers. Now, it's very rare, but once in a blue moon, somebody will do everything we've asked them to do, have high scores that reflect they should pass, and they don't. And almost always it's a result of memorizing things and not being able to then translate the memorization into the conceptual stuff that they're getting asked. There's not a lot of conceptual stuff, Abby, on your SIE. It's mostly recognition. But on the other exams, NASAA exams and sevens, there's more judgment kind of questions that you have to kind of reason your way through. Um, yeah, 80s are good. So I said mid 70s. I know some employing broker dealers and some test prep vendors went to like in the 90s. I'm like, that's ridiculous. I know one firm, they won't let them move on to unit two till they get a 90 on unit one, which I think is stupid because, unit one is not as important as unit two. So, you got to kind of pay attention to the weighting. Did you see? Vince says it warms my heart. He held up, and I recommend this to everybody. He held up the test specifications study guide for his exam with his notes to say, do I intellectually own each of these items? And I would recommend that for everybody. Have his SIE content outline, the Series 7 content outline. And, when I sometimes am teaching and somebody said, well, how do you know it's not on the test? I said, well, they can't randomly make up things to test you on. They have to kind of tell you what they're going to test you on. The content outlines, the study guides are what NASAA and FINRA provide to tell you this is how we're going to test you. And so what I would suggest you is go through that and put a plus next to each item. Plus means you understand it. You don't think there's going to be a problem there. Zero means par. You think you're a par. You kind of got a general idea. Counterintuitive, but what we're looking for is minuses, where you go, oh man, I don't know what that's about. And then you go do remediation and you kind of try and fix it, right? So now Vince showed us his outline for his 65, and now he's going to do the same thing on 63. What's productive about that is he's going to actually see all the stuff he already knows because it's going to be the same basic kind of things again. Same thing you would, Abby, when you get the 7 content outline, you're going to see all the stuff that you already, some of it that you already knew from your SIE. There's going to be new stuff, but it's going to be some of the same stuff as well. So highly recommend that. It's on the FINRA website. You go to the FINRA website. They have a content outline for the SIE, all their FINRA exams, but for our purposes, SIE and 7. And Abby, I'm so glad that Amber brought this up. For you, if you don't already know, there's also a FINRA practice test on that website, and it's really reflective. If you haven't done it yet, have you done it yet? Don't save it because it's a good test to get a mark from when you're 2, 3 days out. And so I don't like people spending it right away because if you do it right away, like the other day, some guy told me he got a 90. I go, well, okay, how many times have you done it already? Oh, well, I did it 5 times. I go, okay, well, that's not very helpful.
I remember you saying that in the
Yeah.
seminar.
So,
Yeah, no, I'll definitely save it.
yeah, save it. You get that mark, and that's going to be a good mark. So, good mark. And I have a doppelganger version I wrote. And what I did, Abby, is I just took the FINRA exam. I kept their answer sets. And I just made different questions because one of the challenging things is the distractors, that's the technical name for wrong answers, are very good and they're right answers to different questions. So, I just went ahead and rotated and said, okay, here's the same answer set, but now this answer is this instead of that. And so that's one of the things that makes all these tests challenging is they're pretty good at distractors. There's usually one that you can just toss out right away. Like we had the one where it said, it's a mistake that will be rectified shortly. That's never going to be the right answer. Or, cannot be determined is never the right answer. Right? So don't ever, oh, maybe I can't figure it out. No, you can't. So, there was usually a toss out. And then the challenging part is you get to a 50-50, right? And then you got to work on the 50-50, right? I have somebody I was working with, goodness, she made her mark, but she was always getting it to a 50-50. I mean, and that's, I was trying to tell her that's good. I mean, you can't beat yourself up. Give yourself some grace. You're 1 and 2 is better than 1 and 4. In her case, she just was overthinking it. We just had to work on her trusting her first kind of flash response, which was the right answer. She was getting her using her own brain to outsmart herself. You don't want to do that. All right, looks like we're done for the day. Anything else last minute? All right, I'll see you either in the Q&A jam session or I'll see you for the next paid office hour, wherever I see you next.
Thank you, Dean.
Welcome. There's Mom working away on her new walkway. You okay? All right. All right, everybody. I'll see you next time. Remember, inch by inch, your exam's a cinch. Yard by yard, your exam is hard. Mom thinks it should be the other way. She thinks it should be yard by yard, the exam is hard, inch by inch. So I said, well, Mom, too late. We've been doing that kind of mantra for a long time. All right. See you next time. Bye bye.